This is the Little Moments Count radio podcast, created in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. Each episode, you'll hear interviews with early childhood experts on how to support the important brain development that takes place in the first 1,000 days of life, just through little moments every day. Learn more at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.
Thank you so much today for tuning in. Welcome to The Narrative on KRSM Radio, where we amplify the voices, stories, and cultures and conversations happening in our neighborhoods. We focus on communities that have been historically ignored, misrepresented, and erased by traditional media. I am your host, Andrea Pierre, and today's guest is a very special person, Carrie Zelin Johnson, and this episode is presented in partnership with Little Moments Count. Little Moments Count is a statewide collaborative focus on helping parents and caregivers learn about the importance of brain development in the first 3 years of life. Nearly 80% of brain growth happens in the first 1,000 days, and small moments of interaction like talking, playing, reading, and singing help create the pathways that build up a child's brain during this early stage of their life. If you want to have more information about this, you can visit littlemomentscount.org. And we're just so excited to be partnering with Little Moments Count to host this conversation focused on early childhood development. Each month, I'll have a new guest on The Narrative to talk about their involvement in Little Moments Count and how they view the role of early childhood development, creating bright futures and strong communities. So, hello, Carrie Zelin Johnson. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having you. Thanks for coming in. And, you know, it's good weather today. The rain hasn't started just yet, but
I say bring it. Wash all that salt, sand, grime away.
Exactly. It's like my least favorite time of year a little bit just because the snow's all dirty, the stuff's outside melting that's been frozen for a while, if you know what I mean. It's a weird time, right?
Yes.
Let's get a little bit into your bio. So if you don't know who Carrie Zelin Johnson is, she has served on various consultant roles to help individual organizations and schools achieve equitable outcomes for over 25 years in Minnesota. She has served on the school board for a PK through 8 charter school, led home visiting programs, and directed and founded accredited preschools and other community-led initiatives. In these roles, she has ensured full implementation of culturally and linguistically responsive curriculum and effective staff development. Big words for me today. Linguistically, I love it. Currently, she is the Community Impact Program Officer at the Greater Twin Cities United Way and coordinates the Start Early Funders Coalition. Being a parent and grandparent has given her unique lived experiences and insights on both viable community solutions and persistent systemic barriers impacting children and families. Carrie is also a public policy advocate with a focus on social, emotional learning and teaching, the arts, and equity in education and mental health. So welcome, Carrie, to The Narrative here on KRSM. What a great bio, first of all, like 25 years and just all this.
Counting.
Wow. Like, seriously, what made you want to get into this work?
You know, for me, my journey started as a parent. So I got into this work first and foremost as a parent. I was a teen parent. I was a young parent raising 5 children by the time I was 26. And co-parenting with my mother-in-law, my partner, my stepson's mother as well. And also, you know, a lot of people have a lot of things to say about what you're doing as a parent. Mm-hmm. And so when they say it takes a village, it truly does. But sometimes you don't really want to hear everybody's, you know, opinion. About what you're doing, and for me, all my kids are kids of color and have various exceptional needs, you know, neurodiversity and different ways of learning and understanding the world, and just it was a crash course on how to parent. Mm-hmm. It's always a crash course on how to parent. Nobody teaches you how to be a parent, trains you how to be a parent. There's no license to be a parent. So it was really a crash course on what it meant to support them and see them as individuals. It was a crash course for me on what it meant to navigate the schools and the resources. And, I think I was a little blind to as many friends and family that I had that were of different cultures and races than me growing up. I certainly was blind to many of their lived experiences in the school systems and in the human services and whatnot. And so seeing my children starting to experience some of those things, seeing my friends and family experiencing those things, us having real candid conversations about the hurt and the harm in some of those systems, made me want to know better, do better. And I actually went to school to be an architect. That was my dream, and I wanted to do that because I'm a creative person. I love the arts. I designed my first home when I was 16 years old, and so I had a teacher who told me, you could do this. This is something that you can do. But when I became pregnant as a teen, and I was in a really unhealthy relationship, I didn't think. I didn't carry the same belief system with me to say that's something I could do. I actually had an opportunity to be an intern. I had a local firm had asked me to be an intern, and I had to turn them down because I was having babies.
Yeah.
And it just didn't seem like something that was going to be possible. And so I finished school when I started my senior year for my bachelor's degree. I had a case manager at the time who was helping me make sure I had childcare. And I found out I was pregnant at the start of my senior year in college. And she said, you can't have this baby.
Oh, my goodness.
And I said, what do you mean I can't have this baby? She goes, you'll never finish school. You're not going to accomplish your goals, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I said, here's one thing I people need to know about me. When you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to do it. Yeah. I'm going to prove you wrong.
How many children did you have at that time? Did just the one? Or?
I had one of my own, and then at the time my sister-in-law, and then my stepson.
Okay.
Yep. So I already was responsible for 3. And co-parenting, and and I was on the bus. Let me tell everybody right now, I didn't have my driver's license.
That's
so
hard too.
I was on the bus doing. I was taking 3 buses to get a turkey and 2 buses to get my name in a drawing for a free bike. Whatever it took, right? But she told me I could, and I said, no. You know what? I'm going to have this baby, and I did. I finished my senior year, 9 months pregnant. I graduated 2 weeks before I delivered. And at the time when my child was born, I didn't know anything about, I knew about learning challenges, right? I knew about dyslexia and learning difficulties. I knew about my own learning challenges and stuff. But my daughter, when my daughter was born, very soon I realized she had some challenges. She had vision issues, hearing issues. She had language and speech delays. She had some sensory stuff going on. The school ended up giving her an educational diagnosis of autism. Fraser gave her a diagnosis of ADHD. So here on now, not only am I navigating the systems to help me get my basic needs met, but navigating the school systems and the support systems for her. And I had to get into it. And so when there was an opportunity for me to apply to work at an organization that was actually doing home visits for me, they were coming into my home and supporting me as a parent. I had my bachelor's degree. I'm like, I could do this. I can do what people are doing. They're coming in and talking to me as a parent. I had a belief system that I could go do what they're doing. So I applied and I got it. And I started doing home visits, and I got a lot of really wonderful training on child development, developmental delays, prenatal care, just the whole wraparound curriculum. And that was with Way to Grow, which if you don't know about Way to Grow,
great organization.
Go look them up, right? That the wraparound holistic supports that they were doing for me and my children mattered. It made a difference. And then I became a home visitor myself for them. And, that advocacy and what I'd be like, okay, I guess I'm not going to be an architect. I guess I'm going to be in early childhood. And I ended up going back to school.
It's a different kind of architecture, though.
Yep,
it's like
it is.
Of your life, you know what I mean? Those early stages of life, noticing those milestones of your own child being delayed, certainly, and then getting the wraparound services, but you're helping them build a new life, like not what is expected, I guess, when your child is differently abled.
Yeah. And I did go back to school. I ended up going back to school. I actually was recruited by the University of Minnesota to do a community-based research project that helped be the founding research for the Minnesota Reading Corps, the Seeds of Early Literacy. And I went back to school. I got my master's degree in education, minored in ed psych, but at the same time, there's still like these growing pains of the kids are getting older, they're having different needs, they're not doing as well in school, and that advocacy, part of that work and advocacy you just had to constantly be an advocate for school. I always had to have jobs that I could leave.
Yeah.
And not get in trouble. I couldn't do a clock in, clock out job. I wouldn't have any financial stability. And I was working my way off welfare back then too. I was on what they call the welfare to work, right? Even though I'm going to tell you right now, welfare is work. It's a lot of work to be getting benefits from the system. You have a lot of math you have to do. You can't go over. You can't do this. You have to report things, right? Like it was a full-time job, really, on top of a full-time job of navigating those systems. But that advocacy piece of, I had to leave a job and for an hour or two, go to the school.
Yeah.
Or the teachers are calling me, your child this, your child that. And I never even thought of my kids as being like naughty kids. Like, and I'm doing, the quote unquote over here because I don't like thinking kids are bad. Big eye opener for me was in being in a preschool classroom, and I went in for the first time, and little African American boy tugged on my shirt and looked down and said, "Teacher, I'm bad." And it just broke my heart because at the age of 3 or 4 have you already have it in your head that you're bad? Who has told you? What messages have you heard that have already told you that you're bad? And I went in, I'll be honest, I was not a pleasant parent. When I don't even know why the schools called me. They knew I was going to come in and probably not act right. Yeah. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
Because when I was younger, I didn't really care what, I just said what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. I would cuss teachers out and principals out and, but part of that was I felt offended, I felt hurt, I felt attacked, I felt judged. That came from a really raw place. But no, not my child. What did they do? Well, they did this. Well, what?
Yeah. Why weren't you watching them? Why weren't you this?
They gave away so much power by calling me in. And I remember being on the other side of that work where I was going in and observing teachers. Now I'm in the education world and I'm in the mental health world, and I'm observing teachers, and they're giving power away. I remember, I'm going to date myself with this story a little bit, but I remember a teacher going, "I'm going to call your mom." And he's like, go ahead, call her. He didn't do anything wrong. He was just bored because he finished his test early.
Wow.
But he needed to behave for the duration of while everybody else finished the test in order to go to recess. He's like, go ahead, call my mom. You want her pager number? You want her phone number? You want, like he just didn't care because I think in his heart of heart, he knew his mom had his back.
Yeah.
He knew his mom was going to come up, and it wasn't going to be him that was in trouble. It was going to be the teacher who was in trouble. And sure enough, when recess time came, he was on the wall. The first thing the parent did when they got there, they looked at their child standing on the wall and told him, go play.
Yep.
And so he read it to recess. She did an override of the teacher. Now, there's going to be some people out there like, oh, we can't have that. We can't have parents, overriding teacher authority. Well, we also can't have teachers overriding parent authority, right? Like, there has to be this partnership.
And also, taking away recess, if you've been sitting in a desk all day, isn't that great for, learning. You do need some of that gross motor movement before you sit down to do that fine motor movement like that.
Yep. And 82% of our schools in this country still use recess as the form of punishment.
Yeah. Which
right?
I think we need to
removal
stop.
of punishment. Removal of recess as a form of punishment.
Yeah.
And
don't use food as punishment. Don't use.
Thank you.
Don't use recess as a form of punishment. There's a lot of other ways to get the behavior that you want. I feel like too, and I do know that having BIPOC or biracial children yourself. You see the difference sometimes in how they're treated and how they're disciplined. Like, it's a well-known studied fact that children of color are more disciplined than others.
They are. I've seen it. I've seen it. And it's just like you look for the behaviors, you're going to find them.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking, too, just for you, having been that young parent, having to come down, having a child that also is differently abled, and being on both sides, being the parent and now also working in the field, what are ways for educators and parents to really connect? You know what I mean? A little bit better and with some more understanding to help these youth.
I have heard parents have very negative things to say about teachers in the presence of children. Mm-hmm. That does not help the child. Doesn't help the child. Parents can say, in one sentence, education is important. But in the next sentence, they're putting down the teacher or they're being negative about the teacher. That's confusing for a child. And we need to model what we value. If we value education, if we value, an ideal like respect, well, what does respect look like? And parent-teacher conferences have changed, right? Post-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, we're seeing more and more conferences are being virtual. I wish, how many buses I had to take to get to conferences? Right. Like, I wish there was virtual conferences, but taking advantage of those conferences, taking advantage of the new ways in which schools are communicating, whether it's text or some system, like, talk to your teachers. They're human beings. A lot of them are parents themselves, right?
Yes. And
vice versa. Teachers also need to see their parents as partners in this. Mm-hmm. And I really wish that parents or teachers valued parents as their child's first teacher. Because, and that parents know their kids very well. They know their kids. And, it's universal that all parents want their kids to be happy, healthy, successful, whatever success, means, right? And safe. Mm-hmm. And, parents want that. Now, do we all agree on the ways to accomplish those things? No. There's a lot of, diverse perspectives on what does it mean to accomplish those things. And teachers, the same thing, like those relationships, if it's parent-teacher conferences, if it's going on the field trip, if it's being a part of the parent-teacher organization or PTA, or for me, I joined the school board now. I know not everybody's going to go get on a school board. But I served on my kids' charter school board for 6 years. Mm-hmm. That was great for my kids. They might not think so, but they never knew when I was going to be at the school.
Yep.
And that was a luxury that's a luxury I know that not all parents have. Not all of us can do school pop-ups. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing with kids. If they know you've popped up 1 or 2 times or 3 times even in a school year, that's enough. That could be enough to set a precedent that they don't know when you might pop up. Mm-hmm. So even if you can't pop up 10 times, 20 times like I was,
no, it does.
You can pop up. You can set the precedent that you're there and you're aware and you're engaged. Yeah. And your teacher knows your parents. I remember one of my kids being so surprised when they are like, "You two know each other?"
But it's good.
Yeah. How do you know each other?
I worked at my children's school. I worked in the special ed classroom, but I worked in their school, and they didn't have a lot of absences. I was able to really kind of check in with them throughout the day, and I feel like even just like, especially when my kindergarten, my youngest, I was able to be there for her kindergarten. And she has a lot of anxiety, and I think it really helps her kind of relax during the day that she can just wave to me and, be walking with her class.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit, for those who are just tuning in, let's say this, you're listening to The Narrative here on KRSM Radio. I am speaking with Carrie Zelin Johnson, just an amazing background in education and mental health and advocacy. Let's talk a little bit more about this little brain development thing in these first 1,000 days. What can parents do really to maximize their child's brain development?
You know, I gave a lot of thought to this because one of the things one of the skills I developed over time, I was not good at this from the beginning, but I got better at it as I went along, is being present, being a present parent.
Oh, and that phone will take you away from everything.
Yeah, long before phones, though.
I think my cat's annoyed with my phone.
Long before phones, right? But I always worked 2 or 3 jobs. I was always engaged in a lot of other, extracurricular stuff. I had my kids in extracurricular stuff, and I got better at it as I went along. And certainly doing the work as a home visitor, and then doing the work with the early literacy projects and whatnot, I became more in tune with, those moments, those little moments. I even wrote a curriculum a long time ago called Seizing Teachable Moments, right? Like, I became a little OCD with teachable moments. But you only have like a few seconds. You have like sometimes 8 seconds, sometimes 15, sometimes 30. Sometimes a kid will give you 5, right? Before you've lost them and their attention span. And so for me was finding those little moments to be present. And I'm not a singer. You can tell by my voice, number one. First, I'm very hoarse, but I'm not a singer, but I love music. And I sang a lot to my kids. I made up name songs. So they each have their own song that has their name in it.
That's super cute.
And nobody taught me to do that. I just, or maybe somebody did, and I just don't have consciousness of it. But I made up songs. Each of them have a song with their name in it. And I sang songs that I knew, at least a verse or two from memory. So it wasn't, radio or from an iPod, or I can even say cassette or CD, right? It was just songs that I just knew that were on my heart.
Yeah.
And there's little glimpses where we know that those things make a difference, right? And I always encourage parents to write those little moments down when you feel affirmed. But singing and then reading, I was in the early literacy stuff, so I was like, oh, read. And I used voices, and my kids would bring books to me, read this. And I would read the same book 3-4 times, Bismarck the Buffalo, and they just knew the voices, and they wanted me to read those to them. And they would read the books to me too. So singing and reading, and then also just part of that being present is just being playful.
Yes.
Like I think I was trying to shed some of the disciplinarian parenting skills that I had, grew up with and learned with, and my kids would probably say, "No, you didn't," but I tried to shed some of that and be playful. I think back to spring break and winter breaks where we'd be in our PJs for days, right? And we'd have pillows and blankets on the living room floor and playing Crash Bandicoot and NBA Jam and,
you took it way back.
Right? Madden. No, I'll take it back. Double Dribble.
Oh my God.
Right? Like we would be on the floors and eating junk food. We didn't even know what day it was, what time it was. We're like, oh my gosh, you guys got to go back to school in 2 days. We got to get back on the sleep routines, But being playful with them, being mindful, and but that was before mindful was a thing. But just being present with them, and there's times where you get that little glimpse of, that little moment, like those things that I'm doing, even though I don't get it. Maybe I'm getting it wrong 80% of the time, but 20% of the time I'm getting it right today. There's moments, I think of little things I've written down where my daughter, I think she was like 10 or 12, and she was like, "Mom, Dad, when I get grown, I'm going to stay home and take care of you guys.
Aww.
You know, and I'm like, that's sweet, baby girl, but no, you're not. You know, like, you're going to be moving out. You're going to be moving on. Or when my dad passed away.
Success is them having their own life,
yeah,
their own dreams.
And, you know, when my dad passed away, my daughter was 5, and a couple months later, my grandfather passed away. His father passed away, and I was reading a story to her, and it was a story that I had read to her many, many, many times, and a story that my dad had read to me when I was a kid, and I just all of a sudden got so emotional. And my daughter assumed I was emotional because my grandfather passed, because it was so soon after. She's only 5 years old, and she puts her arm around me. She said, "Mom, it's going to be okay. I know what it's like to lose a grandfather."
Aww.
And that empathy response that she had at 5 was, like, I even cried more when she after she said that to me, right? But that empathy response, that was a little moment right there that was so affirming to me as a parent that I must be doing something right if my 5-year-old has this kind of empathy in her heart and was connecting. Yeah. So even though we're busy, what are those little moments where we can stop and connect?
And those little moments really don't have to be where you're spending a lot of money. It really is just about, being silly in the kitchen while you're cooking and, narrating your day, or just, talking, laughing. Like, everything doesn't have to be so serious. Like, sit down now, it's reading time. Like, no, you can make it goofy. You can make it fun.
Hey, they can be on their heads while I read. I kind of remember the Spike Lee book with the little baby, and he's like, "Please, baby, 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 please." Like, I had to read that book so much to my oldest daughter. I kind of knew it by heart almost. I'm also just thinking about, in your work, what have you seen as the long-term education and health benefits from getting these first 1,000 days correct with students and children? You know, even though in my mental health work, I did what's known as Children's Therapeutic Supports and Services, and that's where kids who are 3 to 21 can have their medical actually pay for a skills worker to come into their home, into their school, into their communities, and support them, and also do family sessions so parents are learning the skills they need to help support any skill deficits that their child may have, whether it's focus, self-regulation, all those things. I didn't always have kids in the early childhood age range when I did that work for 15 years. I often had kids that were, a little older, starting like 3rd grade all the way up to 21. And one of the things that just kind of solidified my belief system in early childhood is watching how much they struggled in those older years, in those elementary and junior high and high school years, and just me wondering, what if they had early interventions? What if they had, because so many of them did not. It's in their summary, right, when we do the intake, that they did not go to Head Start. They did not go to High Five. They did not go to a high quality, accredited or 4-star parent aware program or something. They didn't have any early childhood. And so in my heart of hearts, I always wonder, what if they did? What if they had that opportunity the first 3 years of life, the first 5 years of life? We say 80% of the brain is developed by the time they're 3 and 90% of the brain by the time they're 5. No pressure, right? But if they had those opportunities, would they be having the same behavioral challenges they're having now, the same social-emotional delays, the same mental health diagnoses, right, from the DSM-5? Would they have the same number of expulsions and suspension rates and other challenges, right? Because those first 1,000 days are not just important for the health of the child. Like we know in Minnesota, more than 50% of Minnesotans have one or more of adverse childhood experiences, right? Yeah. And there's about 12,000 3-year-olds with one or more adverse childhood experience. Well, that equates to about more than $17,000 in medical costs, right?
Wow.
So why wouldn't we invest in early childhood, high quality early childhood programs that are trauma informed, culturally responsive, linguistically supportive, right? So that they can get that that support and that structure and those, that helping and that healing while they're babies, right?
Yeah. I'm thinking too just about, with early, like ECFE, I noticed any white moms that I went to that I knew were doing ECFE. Not a lot of the black moms were.
I didn't have time for ECFE.
Exactly. I was trying to survive, right? I had bills to pay, things like that. And I was like, oh, y'all go,
I loved it.
Met through ECFE? Wow.
I loved it. I supported it. I tried to get as many families as I could enrolled in it. And I sat in on a lot of ECFE classes. And I wish I was there with my kids, but I was often there as a community on my work time, right?
Yeah.
And I wish I could bring my baby to work with me today and be here in this class. But yeah, there's something for everybody, and ECFE is for some people, and for other people, they have to go a different route or they're working, and they have to figure out another way to connect. Yeah.
To bring that community in and connect, because for me, I just kind of see a lot of young parents that I feel like need to be pulled in and not be judged and not feel uncomfortable. You know what I mean? And I see kind of that was the gap for me. I don't want to sit there with a bunch of even though I was a stay-at-home mom myself, I'm not going to sit there with them. We have nothing in common. Not really realizing that those opportunities also for me was a little moment almost to really connect with other people who are going through the same things, because it's very unique when your children are young. You're trying to figure things out, and it's stressful. And community does help. You know what I mean? Wherever you can find it.
Yeah, when I was in school and college, I didn't feel like I could relate to any of my classmates. Because I was a parent, because I was a young parent. They're talking about they're going to go do this, or their dad's going to give them money to go on spring break, and I'm like, yeah, I wish my dad give me some money to go fill up my gas tank.
Right.
I had a completely different reality. My context was completely different. The things I worried about were completely different. But one of the things that I really valued about the home visits that I got, because home visits break isolation, right? And having a home visitor come in for me was a little daunting and a little scary and a little triggering, for some of the adults in my household who, when an outsider came in, that meant intrusion and invasiveness, right? We're in your business. We're going to see some things we don't like. And, I always did feel judged, my house has to be clean if somebody's going to come in. And, and clean, not it's dirty, but clean I don't even want a crumb on the counter.
Yeah. Right?
Or you're going to cancel the visit because you got a pile of laundry or, a week's worth of socks unmatched.
Stress.
It was.
Added stress.
And anxiety, right? And so, but when you can have a relationship with somebody, you start to understand that they don't really care about those things. They care about you. And I always encourage people, if you're isolated, look into what home visiting programs are available, because then they can come to you. You don't have to go to them. One of the greatest things about the CTSS that I mentioned is those mental health practitioners come to you. Yeah. You don't have to go to the office. They come to your home. There'd be times where I would be with a family that has 3 kids that were on my caseload, and I would be there 8 hours. And I'm just doing life with them. I'm breaking bread. We're having highs, lows, laughing, crying, doing Saturday chores. They didn't care what their house looked like, And one of the things I carried with me, I heard it when I was a teenager, is people won't care what you know until they know that you care.
Okay.
And I always took that with me, because I feel like if somehow families could see I'm just a regular person, I'm just a mom trying to do this too, then I'm not a threat.
Yeah. And I think too, because I feel like we have a lot of shared things that are happening like on our motherhood journeys, I feel like that resonate with me. You know, being a non-atypical student, having children that you're trying to raise and pay bills and do things, being on the system, you know, needing social services like for healthcare and food. You know, how can parents best navigate social services or welfare systems? Like, what advice can you give for that?
Yeah. You know, I mentioned before it's a full-time job. And just like any full-time job, there's people that you're not going to like. There's
Some
things
people act
you're gonna,
like it's their money. Like,
Yes.
it's not your money, honey.
Yeah. I remember telling one of my caseworkers, you know, I do work. She's like, you work. I said, I report it, right? And I go, what does that make me? She goes, what do you mean, what does that make you? I said, it makes me a taxpayer. You know, because part of you know, navigating these systems is also navigating people, their attitudes, their belief system. And I really had to, you know, get some thick skin around not caring what people thought of me. Because at the end of the day, I still want that bike. I want that turkey. I want my WIC. I want my food stamps. I'm piecemealing all. I want my check from the work. I want my A on the paper I just submitted. I'm piecemealing all these, you know, this is a puzzle, you know, 1,000-piece puzzle of all the little different resources you have to piece together. You know, I would take clients of mine to go to the food shelf. I'd stand in line with them just to have that humility.
Yeah.
And I would get some food for my kids the same time they're getting food for their kids. You know, and I remember I got a turkey, and the lady's turkey got stolen from between her legs when she was loaded into her car. And I just gave her my turkey.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, doing things in community, having relationships. One of the things for me for navigating the systems is developing relationships with the people on the other side of those services. I knew Diane at the Salvation Army in Northeast Minneapolis. Like, I knew I was doing community work, so I was on action groups and boards and, you know, other kinds of things. So we have to humanize each other, right? We have to have relationships. And when I transitioned from being that parent who was navigating those systems and accessing those resources, and then was starting to do the home visits, I remember showing up with a client, and they're like, oh, you know what, we don't have any bread today or something. I was like, no, actually, I'm here with so-and-so, and she's trying to apply for energy assistance or whatever. Like, that lady already knew I was coming for bread on a Wednesday.
That's funny.
But I was like, no, I have a new role. I whip out my card. And
they're probably proud for you and cheering for you.
Yeah.
Like,
and, cool. You know, but we were doing that work in community, you know. And I had the privilege of whatever community I was living in, I was working in.
It makes a difference, doesn't it?
It does. And so those relationships, like, have your go-to people. And I had go-to people. I was like, you know what? This lady told me I can't do this, and this. Is that true? Because my other friend told me this, and this. And she'd be like, oh, that's because you have to call on the third Friday of the month and do. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Use those relationships to learn the cheat codes.
You have to, yeah. Yeah, instead of down, left, right, BA select start, right? There's some people who know what that means out there. Yeah, there's cheat codes. And you know, the other thing, too, is I had to lose the guilt.
Yeah.
I had to stop feeling guilty for needing resources and asking for help.
Yeah, I feel personally, too, once I took that, I call it, like, sometimes I feel like I have a chip on my shoulder, and once I remove that and really just kind of say what I need, and just say it because I need it, like, this pride and all this other stuff isn't getting me anywhere. This ego isn't getting me anywhere. Like, I have goals that I want to achieve, and I have to ask. I have to say it, because closed mouth don't get fed, as my mama used to say. If you are just tuning in, you're listening to The Narrative here on KRSM Radio. We are doing our Learning Little Moments Count segment. We have Carrie Zelin Johnson. I do want to talk, just because we're getting near the end, but just your work as the Community Impact Program Officer at the Greater Twin Cities United Way, and also talk about a little about the Start Early Funders Coalition. So is there anything you can tell us just what you're doing at the Greater Twin Cities United Way? Great organization.
Yes.
Of course, but yeah.
Yeah, United Way, I never actually even imagined working for United Way. And when I first came in 2019, I immediately had the opportunity to write my story, to potentially be like a campaign speaker and talk about my story and stuff. And in that process, I took a look back and I glanced at the list of nonprofit organizations in the Twin Cities and the nine county metro area. There was over 30 organizations on that list that I benefited from support and on my parenting journey. And then I took another look back at it, and there was probably 20 plus orgs on there that my kids had benefited from or were currently benefiting from supports and services.
Got it.
And, we talk a lot at United Way about uniting as change makers, right? Advocating for social good and really developing solutions to address challenges no one can solve alone. And when I looked at that list of all those organizations, we can't solve these challenges alone. We have to do this in community. I like to refer to the community, and you'll see it on my LinkedIn, the beloved community, right? Like, how are we in relationship with one another? How are we supporting and loving on each other and seeing each other and humanizing each other? And we can't solve the problems alone. And communities have solutions for the challenges that they're experiencing, and we need to trust and invest in those innovations and those solutions. Mm-hmm. We at United Way, we want to fuel lasting change, right? I talk a lot about navigating systems. Well, there's so much time and energy to go into navigating systems. We need to change the systems that need navigation in the first place. Mm-hmm. It just shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be a full-time job to navigate our systems, right? It should be easier. And we really want to do that in a way where all people are thriving regardless of their income, their race, or their place, right? Like, your zip code shouldn't define your outcomes. Your race shouldn't define your outcomes. Your income shouldn't define your outcomes, right? Like, we should all be able to thrive together here in the state of Minnesota. And in my work as a program officer, I'm privileged to work with so many community partners. Majority of them in my portfolio are early childhood education and parent education. I do have some in some of our other impact areas like housing and food security and economic opportunity and our career and future readiness, which is our older kids in education, right? But the work that I'm doing specifically with the Start Early Funders Coalition, that's a group of 19 philanthropic partners from across the state of Minnesota, really coming together and to try to leverage our unique perspective as funders to really advance public policy, community support. We envision a state where all our children in Minnesota have an equitable and strong, healthy start in life. We often joke and say babies are bipartisan.
They are.
Right? Like, babies don't care. When we get into public policy stuff, we get into politics. I am the first one to tell you I don't like being political. I'm not a I can tolerate it, right? Mm-hmm. But the thing at the end of the day, when I say we want happy, healthy, safe, successful children, right? That's regardless of your politics, regardless of your faith, regardless of your race, your gender, any intersections of your identity. We really want what's best for kids. The problem is we struggle with how to get there. Mm-hmm. We struggle with getting a unified voice around, how to get there. And so these philanthropic partners are coming together to try to get that unified voice on how to actually get some progress.
When you talk about all of Minnesota I've recently been very curious about just rural Minnesota and how services are like, I know like it's raising kids is raising kids, but I feel like rural Minnesotans are very much overlooked sometimes when it comes to social services, and there's still welfare, there's still WIC and all that happening in rural Minnesota, but I feel like it's more or less the narrative on it has been that it's an inner city problem.
Yeah, we're more alike than we're different, right? When we think about the challenges that are in rural and urban Minnesota, the first thing that comes to mind, I think about isolation. You can be just as isolated in the inner city as you can be in rural Minnesota. You can have just as many challenges with transportation in both places. You know, if you have to drive an hour to get to a high-quality child care program, or you got to take an hour and a half bus to a high-quality, you know, the challenge is still there. You still have to start your day way earlier than a lot of other people who can hop in their car and be at work in 20 minutes or 10 minutes or, you know, a half hour.
Yep.
And then the hours that programs are keeping, right? We know businesses are, you know, we know restaurants have changed their hours. We know shopping, you know, malls and places have changed their hours. They've changed their hours. They've changed the hours you work. They've changed the hours they're open. They've changed the hours you're working. And we also know we have, you know, child care, you know, dry deserts, right? Like we have places where it's you can't find a slot, you can't find openings, you're on a waiting list, you can't get in. Like we share a lot of challenges that are similar, and the solutions are similar too, right? We have to think about fully funding early childhood education, and when we talk about that from a Start Early perspective, we always say. We always frame it in that we don't pit one program against another, right? We had talked about ECFE earlier.
Scarcity complexes, right?
ECFE is great for some. For others, home visits are what they need the first 3 years of their child's life. For others, they need a part-time preschool. Others need a full-time preschool. They need all-day child care all week long. They need evening child care so they can get that money in a second shift or the third shift, because some second, third shifts pay more money.
Yeah, they do.
And so a parent might want that more money, but then who's going to watch their kids in the evening, right? So there has to be a multiple way in which we think about, you know, the needs during the early years, and families have to get the right size, you know, the right size program or the right size organization to support, you know, their needs. And, you know, our advocacy is really grounded in that there's a multiple delivery model, right? There's something for everybody.
I'm really hearing, too, from you, just like meeting parents where they are, having different options, being able to, you know, adjust to their schedules, their needs, what their life is like, looking at that whole person and the framework of them. You're kind of going into it now, but can you just tell me about some of the public policies that are happening right now in Minnesota around early childhood and how people can get involved and help if this is something that speaks to them?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I want to lift up our Start Early has a parent and provider advisory group. And that's a growing group. We started it in the middle of the pandemic. It lives on Facebook in a private group. And I'll give you a link to our enrollment for folks that want to register. So when you post the radio show, people can find that. So if you're a parent with a child not yet in kindergarten, and if you're a provider in any part of the early childhood education field doing any kind of work, we welcome you to the advisory group. And in that group, we listen to, we want to amplify the voices of the parents and providers, because those are what the public policy and other big P policy, little p policy, right, affects parents and those serving and supporting our children and families directly. We want to hear how that affects them, and we design our agenda off of their feedback and their input and those trends. Greater Twin Cities United Way takes the same approach. We do a survey with our community partners every year and have them tell us what public policy issues and what challenges organizations are facing and what they're hearing from families and parents and individuals that they're serving, so that we can be really in tune with what public policy issues need to be lifted up. Right now, I want people to really pay attention to the Great Start Minnesota. So if you want to find anything about that, search the hashtag Great Start MN, and you'll find it. But we're really promoting and supporting. There's a huge omnibus bill right now that's on the table for early childhood. There's many components to it. There's things in there for family, friends, and neighbors. There's things in there for reimbursing the reimbursement rates of child care providers. Things to keep the scholarships are in there. Things to help retain and recruit early childhood educators to the field and compensate them well. So addressing our workforce issues. I did the math once. If you have a preschooler and an infant in the Twin Cities here in a high quality program, it's about $28,000 a year. Okay, so that's more than college, right? That's more than a college tuition. You can send 2 kids to the U for that. But we don't want parents paying more than 7% of their income towards child care costs. And if you pay $28,000, you need to make $400,000 a year. I don't know any parents. I'm sorry, maybe you do, but I don't know anybody who's a parent of young children who makes $400,000 a year to be able to afford $28,000 out of pocket.
Yeah, childcare is very, very expensive.
And yet we still pay. If you want to put it in perspective, what the average childcare worker makes, we actually pay people more money to watch our cars in the parking lots than we do to care for, educate, and nurture our children during the most formative years.
Yeah.
So we have to do something about the wages as well. And so a couple ways you can get engaged. We have a lot of resources online. You can say, find my legislator, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a landing page in there for you just know who your legislator is, right? Find your legislator. Find out who they are. You can also do a bill tracker, so you can track bills and find out what they're doing. Child Care Aware of Minnesota has a bill tracker on their website where you can just pay attention to the early childhood education bills. Mm-hmm. But there's other bill trackers if you're interested in other bills. But, I always encourage people to reach out to their legislator. Your constituent, they will make time for you.
Yeah.
And not to be afraid of legislators. They're real people. They have real jobs. Some of them are dentists. Some of them are teachers. Some of them, lead nonprofits. This isn't their only job for a lot of them. They're doctors, right? They're doing other things with their day, and they're just regular people. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, and that people latch onto when we get into the political, arena. And it's really meaningful for them to hear your story and hear from you on how a policy is affecting you for the good or for the bad.
Yeah.
And so just talk to them. Write it up in advance if you want to. Handwrite it, type it, print it out. Slide it under their door if they're not there when you get there. Mm-hmm. Email them.
Those things
all
do
kinds
work.
of stuff. It matters, yeah.
It does work.
Yep.
So that website is greatstartmn.org if you want to know more about that legislation that Carrie's speaking of. Greatstartmn.org.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to get a hold of you or talk to you more, Carrie, is there another way to get a hold of you, or is there any other websites or anything else that you...
Well, I'm listed on the Greater Twin Cities United Way. All of us staff have a little bio page, and there's contact information on there, as well as the Start Early page, and Facebook. We have I run the Start Early Facebook page, so you can reach out to me in Messenger that way. I'll leave my card and my information for when you post it up later, and as well as a link to our public policy agenda and some of the other things that I've talked about today.
Yeah. This has been so informative. I love your journey because, like I said, a lot of what you have been through kind of resonates with me. I love people who are not the atypical students, who are out here really just doing care and love to their community, being able to bring their whole self, because, just as someone who's worked in the therapy world, I used to be in the occupational therapy world and things like that, there's not enough people who can be real. Like, there's just like a weird type of, I don't know what to call it. I don't want to say it on air, but it's just like, it's just good to meet people who have lived experiences near your own, who I feel are in it for different reasons, to really just care for our youth. Just really appreciate you coming on The Narrative. And I want to thank everyone else who was listening to The Narrative today. There will be a recording of this show at littlemomentscount.org/podcast. And if you'd like to learn more about Little Moments Count, you can visit their website at littlemomentscount.org. And again, you're listening to The Narrative here on KRSM Radio. And we'll be back again next month with another Little Moments Count segment on the first Tuesdays of the month here. So thank you so much, Carrie.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll be back.
Thanks for listening to the Little Moments Count radio podcast in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. You can find the Little Moments Count radio podcast wherever you get your podcasts and at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.